My investigation started in December 2016. The Breitbart Coroner docuseries details the writing and the release of my book, The Breitbart Coroner.
Conservative commentator and activist Andrew Breitbart died early this morning in Los Angeles. According to his website, Breitbart died unexpectedly from natural causes at UCLA Medical Center. Breitbart was an author and appeared as a guest commentator on many news shows. He also spoke at Tea Party rallies across the U.S. He wrote his book, Righteous Indignation. In it, he wrote, "I always wondered what it would be like to enter the public realm to fight for what I believe in. At the end of the day, I can look myself in the mirror and sleep very well at night." Andrew Breitbart was just 43 years old.
Who was Andrew Breitbart? To explain that, one must time travel back to the political atmosphere that is known as the Obama administration.
But I didn't know what conservatism was in Los Angeles. I'm not the only one. This is a parenthesis in my impromptu speech. There's a book coming out that's a lot better written than my book is. No offense, Andrew. By David Mamet that I got sent by Penguin, called the Secret Knowledge on the Dismantling of American Culture. Get it when it comes out. He has come to the same conclusions that I have come to, reluctantly. The same ones as Dennis Miller, the same ones as David Horowitz. And we are the apostates, Whittaker Chambers. We are the apostates. We are the ex-smokers who are furious when we see somebody lighting up. And so our outrage when we see liberalism in its hypocritical display, we're the ones who get the most outrage. And by hypocritical display, in my book I talk about, it's not that their economic stuff that makes me so angry, though it does. It's the cultural Marxism on the left that drives me crazy.
On September 29th, 2011, the Nixon Library held an event with Andrew Breitbart as a special guest. Breitbart gave a speech that was similar to the one he gave at the Heritage Foundation.
So I think that's one of the things that's happened over the last 3 election cycles is that people just didn't understand the way that the Democratic Party worked with the unions and worked with taxpayer-funded groups like Acorn to subvert the political system. If this is going to be online, yes, that's what they do. I know you're going to say we're crazy conservatives and we're making it all up, but it's not just the convictions, it's not just what's happened in the courts. All you have to do is YouTube Acorn, all you have to do is YouTube SCIU, and you will see an army that is willing, able, and quite feisty in their zeal to attack the American people, to intimidate them at the polls. Let's throw in the new Black Panthers Party while we're at it.
The timeline of Andrew Breitbart's last days gives insight on the mindset of his 2012 goals and ambitions for the election. Journalist Tucker Carlson had placed a bid for a charity Super Bowl dinner and won a dinner with Obama affiliates and leaders of the domestic terrorist group, Weather Underground.
Actually made aware by a friend of mine of this online auction by the Illinois Humanities Council, whose important work I have avidly supported for years.
Yes, I'm
sure.
All of you people in Illinois who are enjoying your humanities right now, it's because of people like Tucker Carlson. Great Americans.
I'm not even really sure what a Humanities Council does, but I know I'm against it. I know that when I hear the word humanities, I draw my gun. But he told me that this organization was hosting an online auction at which they were selling dinner with Pilares and Bernardine Dorn, people I've been aware of for many, many years, ever since I read David Horowitz's book in the 1980s, that has a chapter on them. Anyway, so I thought, holy smokes, that's worth it. So I had him put in a bid on my behalf, and he got it, and we're having dinner in February.
So you won the auction.
Tucker Carlson, Andrew Breitbart, and journalist Jamie Weinstein attended dinner with Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn. Andrew Breitbart proclaimed on February 9th at the 2012 Blog Bash CPAC party to Larry Sinclair News about the Obama videos, quote, "Wait till they see what happens March 1st, end quote. The next day, Andrew Breitbart gave a passionate speech at CPAC and made a statement that sent the crowd into a frenzy.
It's over. There's no such thing as a moderate Democrat. And so what do we get now in Barack Obama? Well, I've got videos, by the way. This election, we're going to vet him. I've got videos. This election, we're going to vet him from his college days to show you why racial division and class warfare are central to what Hope and Change was sold in 2008. The videos are going to come out. The narrative is going to come out that Barack Obama met a bunch of silver ponytails back in the 1980s, like Bill and Bernadine Dorn, who, equally radical, said one day we're going to have the presidency, and the rest of us slept while they plotted and they plotted and they plotted, and they oversaw hundreds of millions of dollars in the Annenberg Challenge, and they had real money from real capitalists who gave it on to their children and their children's children, and then they become communists. We got to work on that. We got to work on that. That's a parenthesis. Barack Obama is a radical. We should not be afraid to say that.
On the evening of February 29th, 2012, Breitbart arrived at a Los Angeles restaurant and bar called the Brentwood. He kept to himself except for a random conversation that was sparked by marketing executive Arthur Sando. Breitbart engaged with trolls on Twitter that night. An account registered to Jacob Rice was created the night of the 29th. It was strictly created to tweet at Andrew Breitbart. At 8:32 p.m., Andrew Breitbart tweeted to a troll, more than likely referring to the Obama videos he was to release on March 1st. Breitbart finished his conversation with Arthur. He then paid his bill and headed home around 11:30 p.m. He exited the bar. Andrew Breitbart started to cross the street. He headed to the parking lot adjacent to Starbucks. He approached the curb and collapsed, his head landing near an electrical box on the sidewalk and his feet near the two newspaper stands. Two witnesses went over to him. One unidentified individual performed CPR on Andrew until police arrived. Another eyewitness, Christopher Lassiter, described the scene to investigative journalist Paul Hebel at WND. Quote, "There was a thick white band around his forehead, all the way around his hairline. Bright red face, thick white band. Made me make a double take." End quote.
Do you know what happened to him? Do you want to know? X9 Investigations. Press gray.
Do you remember who Andrew Breitbart was? He was a conservative journalist who died on March 1st, 2012, shortly after he announced he had tapes he was going to release on President Barack Obama. On March 4th, 2012, a private autopsy was conducted at Glen Oaks Pathology Group by Los Angeles coroner's technician Michael Cormier and Dr. David Posey. Andrew Breitbart had died a suspicious death, and his family wanted a second opinion. Michael worked at the Los Angeles coroner's office for 9+ years. Michael Cremier died on April 20th, 2012, from arsenic poisoning. And guess what? That same day, Andrew Breitbart's preliminary autopsy report was released. It stated that Andrew Breitbart died from natural causes. Los Angeles coroner's office spokesperson, Ed Winter, denied that Michael had anything to do with Andrew Breitbart's autopsy. He dismissed Michael as some coroner's technician. He had nothing to do with the case. Only doctors had anything to do with the case. Oh, and guess what else? The Los Angeles coroner's office, the same place Michael dedicated his life to, destroyed his stomach contents. What was in his stomach? Arsenic. So the place that he worked at for all these years destroyed his stomach contents, and the only key piece of evidence that could even solve the case. Oh, and here's another thing. Before Michael Cremier died, he gave Andrew Breitbart's toe tag to his brother, and he talked about the case. But hey, this is all conspiracy theory, right? All it took was one article from the Daily Beast interviewing Ed Winter and him saying that only doctors worked on the case, and they forgot about the case. They did not investigate any further to find out any kind of information that I have found out. It's really going to take the people watching this to get pissed off. To say, yeah, this is wrong.
Michael Cremier brought joy to all who knew him. His laughter, his quiet persona, his love for music. During my investigation, I found out Michael was more than a man who performed Andrew Breitbart's autopsy. He was a father, brother, and loving friend.
Yeah, I've had this, we'll call it a theory for now, that there was a connection between demonic possession and extremely brutal crimes. And I started to notice here about 3 years ago, every time we'd get a case that was unusually brutal, I would check the toxicology and find out that the drug methamphetamine was involved. And you people out there who are listening to this who use meth, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not making this up. The connection is undeniable. There is a world out there, another dimension if you want to call it, of demonic beings who need access, who want access to this realm. And one of the primary ways we're seeing it happen is through the drug methamphetamine. And I was able to make the connection, slowly but surely, as I began to look at cases and document things, that when you are in that world of that particular drug, you're opening a door you do not want to open. Now, I'm not saying that everybody that uses is going to be a murderer or end up murdered. Everybody that smokes cigarettes doesn't die of cancer. But there's a connection there. And I've been documenting it for several years, and it's undeniable. People who use methamphetamine are opening themselves up to demonic possession and crimes that they can only not even imagine. And if you are fortunate enough to watch Dave's movie, you're going to see some of these depicted. These are going to be actual cases that came through this office. There'll be no names, no faces, but these crimes happen. And as bizarre as you might think they are, as egregiously evil as they are, it really happened. And it's happening every day in this city and cities all over the world.
Thursday, March 1st, 2012. March 1st, 2012 is a date etched into the political spectrum and the lives of the Cremier family. On this day, Michael Cremier enjoyed the sunny California weather at the house of his brother, Gary. Michael's other brother, Ed, and a few other family members were also there. Gary was battling pancreatic cancer, but that didn't temper the mood. Laughs, memories, and Paul McCartney's Blackbird filled the atmosphere. Lyrics of the song now symbolize a different journey for Michael's family.
Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life, you were only waiting for this moment to arrive. Blackbird Blackbirds singing in the dead of night. Take these sunken eyes and learn to see all your life. You were only waiting for this moment to be free. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly into the light of the dark black night.
Sunday, March 4th, 2012. Michael received a phone call to assist on a private autopsy for a celebrity case. MAC Autopsy Services was a small business Michael organized for work outside of the coroner's office. This enabled him to take side jobs for extra cash. The private autopsy was conducted by Dr. David Posey of Glen Oaks Pathology Group. Michael arrived back at Gary's later that afternoon, and as he approached his brother Ed, he pulled a toe tag out of his pocket and said, quote, "I have a souvenir for you. I just autopsied Andrew Breitbart," end quote. Friday, April 13th, 2012. Michael started to feel sick. He experienced severe diarrhea. Sunday, April 15th, 2012. Michael attended the Palmdale Cancer Walk event on April 15th with Gary's partner, Bill, and some friends. He became sick and a friend suggested that he eat a small snack. Michael started to feel better. Wednesday, April 18th, 2012. Michael drove himself to Kaiser Hospital and was admitted for observation due to complaints of chest pains, but was released the next day with medication. Friday, April 20th, 2012. In the early morning hours of April 20th, paramedics were called to Michael's home and transported him to St. Joseph's Medical Center. Ed found out Michael was in the hospital and called to check on his status. He suggested they test for poison due to Michael's estranged relationship with his wife, Sharon. Assistant Los Angeles Coroner Chief Ed Winter arrived first on scene at the hospital along with two unidentified Los Angeles coroner employees. Two police officers were called by the hospital to file an injury report in regards to the poisoning. Michael Cormier died in the hospital at 10:30 p.m. He was 61.
New details today in the mysterious death of a coroner's autopsy technician. There are reports that the 61-year-old may have died of poisoning. KCAL 9's Randy Page is live at the LA County Coroner's Office in Boyle Heights to show us what investigators know so far. Randy.
Lena, I must tell you, this has been a very difficult case here in the coroner's office. This is the first time in recent memory they find themselves investigating the death of one of their own. This is Michael Cormier, seen here in a YouTube video from several years ago, a veteran forensic technician for the LA County Coroner's Office who devoted much of his life to solving the mystery of unsolved deaths. Today, his death is presenting his friends and colleagues at the Coroner's Office with a mystery of its own. Cormier died a week ago after complaining of severe stomach pains. Close friend, former LAPD officer Armand Belderain spoke to him 2 days before he died.
When I called him, he was at Kaiser in Panorama City. He had told me that he was having stomach pains, and he had admitted himself at Kaiser. And I believe they kept him overnight, and he was released the following day.
And then a couple of days later, he was back.
A couple of days later, I got a phone call from a mutual friend who told me that Michael was at Providence St. Joseph. He's not doing too well.
Sources at the coroner's department tell us Cormier was well respected and took his work very seriously. A man known to be meticulous, determined to find the cause of death in order to provide families with answers and some form of peace. Sources also tell us Cormier was a big man with a big heart. The job sometimes wore on him after dealing with so many senseless deaths.
A lot of times he would call me and tell me that to get that sense of peace, he would go to the cemetery and spend time with the Lord to allow God to comfort, to soften his heart.
Belderain says Cormier was a devout Christian. He says he believes his close friend has found peace. As for the mystery surrounding his death,
I think we should give the LAPD the benefit, allow them to do their full and thorough investigation, which I believe they will. and let's wait for the coroner's office and their toxicology report, and I know that takes a while as well. And then we'll have the issue settled in our hearts once and for all.
Wednesday, April 25th, 2012. Conspiracy theory led by blogs, papers like National Examiner, and personalities like InfoWars' Alex Jones and radio host Joe Rogan suspected that Michael Camille conducted the Andrew Breitbart autopsy and got murdered for it.
Well, we now see the headline from WorldNet Daily. The police are investigating the possible poisoning homicide of one of the head coroners in Los Angeles, and it may have been the coroner who actually worked on Andrew Breitbart. Now, just a week ago, we saw the head office say a preliminary examination says that it wasn't some type of trauma that killed him, that there wasn't too much trauma. And the Daily Caller came out and said, well, that's it, Alex Jones is discredited. Man, they're saying that he died of heart failure. When their report says in the preliminary report, before the full report was coming out, that there wasn't too much trauma. And I'll show you that document here in just a moment.
Did you hear about this Breitbart thing?
What is that?
That Andrew Breitbart, the guy who died really recently, is a very controversial journalist character. He apparently had some video that he was going to release about Barack Obama. You know, it was Barack Obama. And there was some video that was released of Barack Obama giving like some sort of a speech when he was younger, when he was in college, I think when he was at Harvard. And just, you know, it wasn't really that radical at all. You know, it's like, but the word was that he was going to release something that was going to be damaging. Well, the fucking dude winds up dying, right? No big deal. He wasn't that healthy. You look at him, he's kind of big fat guy, and he probably had some bad karma. And, you know, there's a lot of wild shit going on in that dude's life. His ticker might have been, who knows, right? So the guy dies. Rest in peace. And then after he dies, his fucking coroner dies by poisoning. So after his coroner says that it's natural causes, then the coroner dies by poisoning. And then you go, okay, what? That's when you got to go, what?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to believe that the government or who the fucking CIA or the Mossad or anybody decided to kill this journalist. And then they paid off his coroner, and then the coroner winds up getting poisoned and killed, or they threatened him, or they used their influence, or whatever the fuck it was. But when you hear a story like that, god damn, it makes you go, is anybody checking on this? Is that, who's looking into that? That seems, that's a little, I would like to sit down with everybody involved in that sort of a situation. If I was the mayor, the governor, or whatever, whoever the fuck would be the one who would have jurisdiction over something like that, I'd like to be the guy who sits down and goes, what the fuck is going on here?
This led to two different officials, LAPD homicide supervisor Detective Rich Willard and Los Angeles Coroner's Assistant Chief Winter, to release statements shortly after Michael's death. Monday, April 30th, 2012. Ed Winter stated to news agencies that Michael Camille never assisted on the Andrew Breitbart autopsy because, quote, only doctors had ever worked on the case because foul play was never suspected, end quote, and that, quote, Mr. Camille was not the attendant on Mr. Breitbart's case, nor did he do any of the handling or any of the investigation, end quote.
I'm Press Gray. What happened to Michael Camille? What happened to his stomach contents? What happened to the evidence? Tune in. I'm Press Gray. X9 Investigations.
Autopsies are the last chance to find the truth about someone's death. It's the final puzzle piece of the physical person. Michael Khmer's autopsy was performed by a close friend, Los Angeles County Coroner Pedro Ortiz. Arsenic poisoning was the official cause of death. 2,300 parts per million of arsenic was recovered and listed into evidence by the Los Angeles Coroner's Office. We're informed that advanced testing couldn't be performed on Michael Khmer's stomach contents. Dr. Ortiz, Michael Khmer Autopsy Report, Form 12, page 8, quote, Opinion. The demise of the 61-year-old is the result of acute intoxication by arsenic. Arsenic is a metalloid element whose effects are produced by blockage of the intercellular metabolic pathways with resultant cessation of cellular activity and death. The symptoms of acute arsenic intoxication are nonspecific and mainly are gastrointestinal, such as manifested in this case, which slowly progressed into multi-organ failure and death. Arsenic can present as the salt of the element, inorganic, or compounded with organic molecules. The most toxic is the inorganic variety. In this case, the source of the arsenic remains unknown in spite of multiple attempts to characterize it. End quote. Dr. Cyrus Rangan, medical toxicologist, states to Chief Medical Examiner Lakshman in the Forensic Consultant's Report, Form 13. Quote, Upon initial review of this case, I had inquired as to whether the arsenic levels could be speciated to determine the relative contributions of trivalent and pentavalent arsenic to his total arsenic level. In addition, I had inquired as to whether the stomach contents could be further tested to determine the form of arsenic salt that was detected. These inquiries were an effort to characterize the descendant's exposure specifically, with the prospect that a potential source of arsenic might be determinable. I was informed that these advanced tests would not be possible. Therefore, my conclusion, based on available data, is that the descendant died from severe acute arsenic poisoning of unknown origin. The clinical presentation and the level of arsenic detected in the blood and stomach are consistent with a large, recent intentional exposure. End quote. Thursday, April 11, 2013. Ed Khmer and Dr. Ortiz conducted a conversation about the case. We have provided 2 minutes of an audio recording and a transcript. This snippet contains Ed inquiring about why Michael's blood and stomach contents had not been tested.
I'm just wondering, Dr. Ortiz, you mentioned the word the lab was inefficient. I'm not sure if I'm understanding what you're saying here.
Well, I'm saying is that the lab could not, they either didn't have the resources or they didn't want to do it. So in that sense, the lab was not efficient. So it was not able to answer our questions.
Yes.
It answered the question that already the laboratory from the hospital had. So
we're puzzled by the fact that there was enough arsenic in Mike's stomach still that we felt that there should have been some test that could be performed to determine, is this an inorganic arsenic or an organic arsenic, and that would narrow down the search immensely. Hey, Dr. Ortiz, are there still samples available from Michael that could be tested again or retested?
I have to check with the Khmer. I can give you a call back on Monday, but I have to check if we have something.
I only have a couple more questions, and one is, and it actually has to do with Dr. Rangan, so this may not be a fair question for you, and you could tell me if I need to speak with Dr. Rangan or if I could about it, but Dr. Rangan said that he inquired as to whether the arsenic levels could be speciated in order to determine the relevant contributions of trivalent and pentavalent arsenic to his total arsenic level. Now, he said he inquired, but then after he gives this statement, he never gives an answer as to...
He inquired because he had the same answer that I got.
He did.
Oh, we can't do it. We cannot do it. There's no way we can do it.
Yes. Yeah, because in the last sentence of this paragraph, he says, I was informed that these advanced tests would not be possible. And my question is, who told them that these advanced tests would not be possible, and why? Why were these advanced tests not possible?
You know, Mr. Comey, I don't know exactly which person of the lab told Dr. Rangan that statement, but that's what we were told, him and myself, by the laboratory supervisor, Mr. Dan Anderson. Anderson was the one who told us that he cannot find anybody who do that, and sorry, we can't do it.
Wednesday, April 23rd, 2014. Ed Khmer never received a phone call from Dr. Ortiz or anyone associated with the Los Angeles coroner's office. Ed Khmer is told by Interim Chief Dan Anderson through email that there was no stomach contents to be tested since the stomach contents was pumped at the hospital. Ed emailed back and corrected him, indicating that in Dan Anderson's own lab report, the stomach contained 2,300 parts per million of arsenic. Wednesday, July 23rd, 2014. Lab tests were finally conducted on Michael Khmer's blood by the recommendation of Ed Khmer, who did a simple Google search to find the laboratory of the Applied and Special Consulting. Michael's blood sample showed the arsenic to be of inorganic origin, which means it was more than likely created in a private lab or corporation. In the case of Michael Khmer, his stomach contents were not preserved the full 365 days granted to him by the retention policy. According to a source, the Los Angeles coroner's office didn't want to spend the money to have Michael's stomach contents tested, as they privately deemed his case to be a suicide. After Dr. Ortiz and Dr. Reagan requested advanced testing on the stomach contents, and when Dan Anderson denied this request, Ed Khmer took it among himself to find a lab for the testing and pay for it out of pocket. If the Los Angeles coroner's office excuse is that they didn't have the funds, then why destroy the stomach contents before the Khmer family could have it privately tested? And why did they stall the case by destroying evidence and not pinpointing the origin of the inorganic arsenic? These facts made me sick to my stomach. I felt the pain of the Khmer family, and I set out to know more about the arsenic death of Michael Khmer and the destruction of crucial evidence and an open investigation. I contacted Michael Khmer's brother, Ed, on YouTube in 2016. After years of research and witness statements, we were finally about to meet. It's now July 2019, and I'm in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, working on another investigation. I'll leave in 5 days to go to Maine to interview the Cormier family and try to find the truth behind the Breitbart coroner.
This is Press Gray, X&Out Investigations. Getting ready for my trip to Maine, which is in 1 day. I wanted to show you some of the equipment that I'll be using. We have a DSLR, which is going to be used in the majority of the shots, especially within the initial investigation. We have a task cam, just a regular recorder, nothing too special. Going to be using different lenses depending on the lighting situation and depending on, you know, the setup. Some of the places we'll be filming at, we may not be able to use the bigger equipment, so I may have to just use my iPhone. But I have the 50 millimeter on here, which is real good for low lighting situations. F-stop, real good for that. And then we also have a 24 millimeter for any wide shots. But I think for most of this documentary, I'm going to be using the iPhone for quick shots for B-roll footage, and then set up the DSLR for the interviews. And Ed Cormier and I have talked, and he also has a Sony camera that we're going to be using, and he has a Rode video mic. So we're going to have double the equipment, and I'm thankful that I don't have to carry more equipment up there on the plane or have to ship it. I think when everything comes down to it, the Breitbart corner and the Breitbart toe tag will be thoroughly investigated on this trip.
Ed Cormier picked me up from the airport and we arrived at his house an hour later.
Okay, Ed. You and I have known each other coming up on 3 years. I think December will make 3 years. I want you to go into how you and I came together through this case and a little bit of your reaction when you first, you know, met me on the phone and knew that I was interested in knowing more about your brother's case.
Well, right after Michael died, of course, we were in shock. But after we got over the shock and began to realize there was something suspicious about this whole thing, I tried to make contact with several different organizations. We began reading articles just a few days after Mike died about some kind of tie-in with even a political type situation. So I tried to contact, on many occasions, I tried to contact Alex Jones, because I thought, well, he's the kind of guy that likes to do investigative stuff. I know he's got some bad labels, especially now, but back then, 7 years ago, it was not the case. He was kind of an up-and-coming guy, we thought. I tried contacting, I actually emailed the Daily Beast. I want to say Huffington Post as well. I emailed them, just letting them know in their blog articles online that I was Mike's brother and I would like to talk to him about the case. I got no response from anyone. And I don't know how many times I tried calling Alex Jones radio station. I mean, many times a day, and I could never get on. So we kind of gave up in a way, not gave up, but we had a family meeting saying, what are we going to do? And we just kept thinking, well, we're just hoping someone's going to take an interest in the case. When you came along, that was a real kind of a relief for the family. A sigh of relief, actually, because there was a couple of other people that expressed interest in it, and to protect their identity, I don't want to mention their names, but there was actually a lawyer out in Pasadena who had my sister contacted, and he wanted to see all the stuff we had on the case, and told us, you know what, I'll really look into it for you. We never heard from him again.
Would you say that this case has turned a lot of people off from it due to the discrepancies and due to
the connections to the high power of the Los Angeles coroner's office and the LAPD?
Well, I'm not quite sure what you mean by turning people off. I know the case died really, really quickly, if that's what you mean. I mean, it was in the spotlight for just a few days, and then it just faded. It wasn't headlines anymore. And then anyone else that brought it up after that they were kind of laughed at, really. Conspiracy theories and that sort of thing.
So at the time of Michael's death, you were familiar with these theories going around about your brother.
Yes,
okay.
yes,
Do you remember the first theory that you heard, or the first time you saw the connection between the two?
Yeah, and I mean, and I the very first theory that we saw was out of called the Examiner. The National Examiner had actually.
I think.
Yeah. That's right. Somebody actually bought the newspaper out there, and so this was the first. So I mean, to us, we didn't even know what to think about it. Okay, I can't say we jumped all over that. To be quite frank with you, I had other suspects in mind as far as who might have done this. But this was. We kind of treated it like some of these other tabloid newspapers. We didn't give a lot of credit to it. You know what I mean? We just thought, wow, kind of crazy. We kind of laughed about it. Actually, we thought, why wouldn't Michael be surprised to see that he's on the same front page as the president? But again, we gave it no. We put it aside very quickly. We just looked at it and thought it was interesting. That was about it. But
anything else that comes to mind back in 2012 surrounding not only your brother's case but Andrew's case? I mean, anything that at the time, I know you had another suspect, but the political angle, now that you look back on it, was it something that made sense right away? Now that everything, all the evidence that we're about to go through in the case, is that the angle now, the political angle, within the Los Angeles coroner's office, politics within that?
Yes. To myself and to the entire family now, we've shifted from thinking one way to there's so much evidence that points in a different direction. So yeah, we're convinced that there's something going on.
The next day, I started off with questions about Michael, and it brought an emotional response.
If I were to say 2 words about Mike, it would be that he was very, very compassionate. And also, he was very kind and gracious to everyone. He just had a real tender heart. And I miss him dearly. I truly do.
Ed and his wife were in California, March of 2012, because Ed's brother, Gary, was dying from cancer. They had to fly back home on March 27th. It would be the last time they would ever see Gary or Michael alive.
Thursday, March 29th, we had just gotten home. We had taken the red eye out of LA on the 27th. Mike drove us down to the airport. Actually met Timmy and Gina at the airport. I remember Mike being on his phone talking to Gina and stuff, and Gina approaches us and we're asking where her bags are, and she said, "Oh, they're back there." And Michael's getting all nervous, thinking, "Oh my God, you left your suitcases on the sidewalk down there somewhere." Well, Timmy was watching them. We didn't know Timmy was coming, so I know that's March 27th. But I had told Mike that night. I said, when Gary does pass, because we knew it wouldn't be long, I said, I want you to make the call. So, damn it. So, March 29th, 9 o'clock at night, we're sitting here watching TV, Brennan and I, and the phone rings.
Ed and I took a break from the interview and regrouped. Reliving that particular moment on camera was the ideal situation for Ed.
So the phone rings, and it's Michael's voice, so I know right away what's about to happen. And he says that Gary's gone. He said he just left. That's how he put it. He's just left. And it literally, I found out from the other kids, Mary that was there, and Timmy and whatnot, and Gina, that's what Mike did after Michael was leaning in front of Gary on his knees, and he reached up and closed Gary's eyes,
And then it wasn't too long after that when he got right up and he went outside away from the rest of the family when he made the call to me. So probably within a few minutes after Gary had passed, he wanted to let me know. He said, I got to get back in there. He said, they're having a tough time. So I talked to him again later on that night. He called me back after he had gone back in. He called me back, and he said they were waiting for the hearse, to come pick Gary's body up. The hospice nurse asked everyone to please leave the room. So Mike said that they all went into the sanctuary and waited. They took Mom in there and the kids, and she dressed Gary up in a real nice shirt. I want to say it was like a pink shirt, I think. I don't remember. But dressed him up in a real nice shirt and just had him sitting there in his chair like he was sleeping. And then the rest of the family came back out and sat with him for about an hour and a half. I want to say at least an hour and a half or two before the people showed up to pick him up. Gary donated his body to science. And he wanted to get to the bottom of what killed him, and he wanted to help out in any way he could. So he donated his body. The University of Arizona, I believe, are the ones that came and took his body to go over in their class.
We arrived at Charlene Cremier's house. She now lives in what used to be Michael Cremier's elementary school. It's been renovated into apartments. We chatted for a little while and then went to the back porch to film the interviews. I talked to Michael's sister first, Gina. She went into detail about one of the last times that she spoke to her brother.
Yes, I talked with him on April 17th. He called me, 7:30 that night, I guess. He was in a really good mood. He had bought his plane ticket, was excited to come home, even though it was for a sad occasion. He had not been to Maine since 1991, so he was pretty excited to come back here. Everything seemed fine.
I inquired with Michael's mother about what she thought of the suicide theory the LAPD and LA Coroner's Office pursued.
I know that wasn't true. I know that my son would never take his own life. Michael was a Christian, and Michael believed in the afterlife, and he believed that only God has the right to take a life. And so I knew that they were covering up, or they were saying what they wanted to believe. They wanted to pass it all off as suicide and get it over with. But I knew that wasn't true. I knew that someone else had done this. Michael would never, never take his own life.
Next, to lighten the mood, she talked about the band Michael played guitar in, the Corvells.
That was a happy time. That was one of the happiest times of our lives, because the Corvells did come and practice in the basement, and we all loved listening to them. And we followed the band. Anytime that they had a gig, we were there. My husband and I were there because we loved that kind of music, and they were good. The Corvells were good. Michael did very well on rhythm. And so it was really a happy time for the whole family. We really all just embraced it. And wherever they wanted to practice or wherever they were going to play, we were sure that we were going to be there, if at all possible.
I finally arrived, greeted by the family of Michael Cormier, and the memories started to form in a symbolic motion. This is the camp where the Cormier family spent their summers, a blissful entry into the interviews that were about to take place. I started off with simple questions. I wanted to explore the memories the family shared with Michael and the man he represented. I interviewed Martha, Michael's youngest sibling, and she reminisced.
Yeah, Michael used to call me sometimes, and whenever I'd answer the phone, he'd say, "Number 8, this is number 1," and I'd laugh, and we'd talk, and he always wanted to know what it was like for me to live with my parents at an older age in life, because they were in their 30s when he graduated, and they were in their 50s, so we used to talk about that. Quite a bit, actually.
I then talked to Michael's other sister, Mary Ann Cormier, and wanted to know if she saw Andrew Breitbart's toe tag the night Michael gave it to his brother, Ed.
We were so surprised that he talked about the Andrew Breitbart case and how he did the autopsy. So Michael was so excited, that we actually, knew this person, and we were like, wow. So Michael came in and he handed my brother Ed the toe tag, and he said, "Here's a souvenir for you." And we were like, wow. That he just kind of had a little grin, like, wow, I didn't even really know who the guy was. I guess because he left home so much before a lot of us. It was exciting for him, for us to come into his world and for us to see what he did for work. And we were proud of him. And I think he loved that his family could see what he did out in California, and he loved what he did. As a matter of fact, he told me, I said, "How can you do what you do?" And he said, I wouldn't change it. I love what I do. I love what I do. I love solving cases. I love finding closure for people. It's just what I do. And so yeah, he was gave Ed the toe tag and said, "Well, here's a souvenir for you." So it was wild. He was just an easygoing guy. Michael was a real easygoing guy. Just simple things. Simple things.
I gained an immense amount of testimony from the next family member, Michael's brother, Tim Cormier. He witnessed Michael perform an autopsy with Dr. David Posey.
Yeah, all right. So, he talked a little bit about being involved in the Michael Jackson case with the LA Coroner's Office. Didn't share details, but just, the fact that he had been involved in it, and a couple of little tidbits about Michael Jackson's appearance, but again, no real detail. But then I had the opportunity, after our brother Gary passed, he had an opportunity to work with Dr. Posey doing a private autopsy, and asked me if I wanted to watch. So I went with him to, I don't recall the name of the town we went to, but it was maybe a 20-minute drive from where we were. I believe it was underneath a funeral home. Somewhere I even have a picture of Mike and I have a picture standing in front of that funeral home, so I could literally probably pinpoint what funeral home it was. But beautiful setting, I remember that. I watched him do an autopsy with Dr. Posey. Mike and I got there first. He gave me the Vicks to put under my nose because he told me, there's a smell that's unlike anything I've ever experienced. Mike got the body out of the cooler, if you will, and got it on the table, and kind of muscled it up where he needed to have it, and got it prepared. And then very short time later, Dr. Posey showed up. Mike introduced me. Dr. Posey had no problem with me being there. Dr. Posey made a point of telling me he really liked working with Mike. He preferred working with Mike over any other coroner tech, especially when they do those private jobs like that. And then from that point, they proceeded with the autopsy, which essentially Mike did all of the cutting and all of the, opening up and, from opening up the chest and taking the organs out. And as he did, he would describe to Dr. Posey what he was seeing, if it indicated, like a deterioration in the esophagus, he pointed out, and things with the heart valve, and Dr. Posey would write it down, and then Mike would, take the organ and move it over into a tray and bring it over and place it on the table, and Dr. Posey would kind of further look at it and then jot down a few more notes.
Then, next, Tim told me him and Michael had talked about Andrew Breitbart's toe tag.
He had told me that he had given my brother Eddie the toe tag from Andrew Breitbart from the autopsy that he had done on the private autopsy he had done on Andrew Breitbart.
The destruction of Michael's stomach contents by the Los Angeles coroner's office emotionally affected each and every family member. Mike's brother-in-law, Mary Ann's husband, John Williams, had quite a bit to say about it.
It's not acceptable. And the key piece that you may be referring to is the stomach contents. I mean, you don't do that. It's not a large volume item. My best friend is a doctor. We've talked about this and the possibility of, anything that relates to someone's death is preserved. And that was not preserved.
I talked to John Cormier, Ed's son, and Michael's nephew. We talked before on the phone. I knew he had crucial information on the inner workings of the Los Angeles coroner's office, since he worked there with Mike for 2 weeks as an intern.
My name is Jonathan Cormier. Michael Cormier was my father's older brother.
John, you have experience working in the Los Angeles coroner's office 2 weeks in October. Can you kind of go into your experience, how you got out there, and once you got out there, what you really encountered?
It started off, I was going to school to be a mortician, and I talked to my Uncle Mike and thought that having some hands-on experience with cadavers would help me along in the state of Maine, and my Uncle Mike agreed.
What is your one experience with Dan Anderson? Can you go into that?
Well, Mike was not at work the day that I was that I had an encounter with Dan Anderson. I don't know if he had can't even remember if he had an appointment or what happened that day. I was working with one of Mike's coworkers, Tech, and me and her was asked to bring the specimens up to evidence. I entered the room and I was introduced to Dan by this girl. And he's like, "Oh, one of Cormier's, huh?" And he started to grill me as to why I was there. So I just told him, I was like, "Look, I'm looking to work for the state of Maine doing this, and this is my one answer." And I guess that wasn't good enough for him, so I just kind of left it at that. Just kind of stopped talking to him.
Would you say he had an attitude?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you relay any cases that you worked on that kind of touched you?
One, a mother and the daughter broke down on the freeway and was rear-ended by a tractor trailer. The little girl was burnt to a crisp, died in the car. The mother was burnt to a crisp and survived for 3 days. They think she heard somehow that her daughter had perished and she just gave up. This girl was burnt 90% of her body, 3rd-degree burns. Kind of stuck with me.
Can you go into working beside your uncle and what kind of experience that was?
He kept it interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was a real smart guy. He was above and beyond his tech. Label.
Yeah.
If you want to. If he had the certificate hanging on the wall, he could have been one of the doctors. We opened up this old lady. She was probably, I think she was like in her 90s. And they thought that the home that she was staying at, they were suspected of starving this woman, like not feeding her. And we opened this woman up. And Mike looked down inside of her. He's like, "This woman should have been dead 10 years ago." I mean, her spine, because when you open them up, you can see the spine. Her spine was a question mark. And he's like, "All right, they say she was complaining of a stomach ache and she wouldn't eat." This is what the nursing home was saying. And the family was trying to get, sue the nursing home. Hey, look, they were trying to starve Granny here, and they were abusing her, elder abuse. And we opened up her intestines, and there was a basketball size, and I shit you not, them little play basketballs. There was a basketball size impact in her intestine. His eyes lit up. He's like, "There's no wrongdoing here. This woman was sick.
Corner 101, were you told the stomach contents is one of the most important pieces of evidence in any type of case? Is that common knowledge within the coroner's office that stomach contents are very important?
Yes, that's one of the 4 things they do. They do eye vitreous, they do femoral artery, they do stomach contents, they do bile. Intestinal bile.
Every
standard.
Every autopsy.
Standard.
Does every stomach contents get taken up to Dan Anderson's lab, or not necessarily?
Yes,
it does.
It goes up to the evidence locker, whatever you call it. And when Dan Anderson opened the door that day, I saw thousands of little vials labeled. Thousands of little vials.
Thousands.
It was a refrigerator, like a big walk-in.
Yeah.
You saw the walk-in coolers.
Yes.
There was a walk-in cooler full of vials of the little, little cups.
But they wanted this story, Michael. Last question that I have. You worked at the coroner's office, so I feel like you're the best equipped to answer this, at least, from this perspective. Do you believe that the LA coroner's office and the LAPD covered up any evidence in the case of Michael Cormier?
I do.
You do?
I do.
Do you believe it was the higher-ups at the Los Angeles coroner's office? Do you dismiss Gustav, Ortiz, Rangan have anything to do with it? Do you think it's above their heads? Did you see some of the backlogs? I'm guessing you saw the bodies stacked to the ceiling.
Yes, I did.
So that's not an exaggeration. That's the truth. That bodies were stacked to the ceiling. That's quote by the former.
They're taken down. Cadavers are on a metal table, flat metal table. They're taken down with a stacker off a hook and put onto caster rollers and wheeled into the autopsy room.
And have you ever seen the toe tag that Ed has?
Not personally.
Okay, what is the size of an average toe tag in the Los Angeles coroner's office?
If I was to
A
put
security crypt toe tag, to be specific.
if I was, one of the manila cardboard tags.
And it's tied around the toe with a string.
Yes, it's probably 2 inches by 1.5 inches. Just guessing size. Yep.
When Ed Khmer and I got back to his house from the camp, we sat down for a full-length interview where we discussed his connection to Andrew Breitbart's toe tag.
Michael brought this up to me one day, the day he did the autopsy on March 4th, and he walked in and he just handed it to me. He pulled it out of his pocket and he said, "I got a souvenir for you," and he handed it to me. And to me, it just registered, yeah, it's a souvenir. He did the same thing to me a few years prior to that when Michael Jackson died, and they had he said they airlifted Michael into the helicopter pad near the coroner's office, or at the coroner's office, because of the crowds.
Yeah.
So right after they brought Michael's body into the coroner's office, he sent me this, and he wrote on it. He said, "This is the tape that was around the helo pad to keep people back or whatever." But he said this was around the helo pad, and he actually had written the case number and stuff on here, Michael Jackson. So it was a souvenir. It's just just something that I saved. And when family or friends would come over, I'd show them, this is Michael Jackson's tape around the thing. So when he gave me that, I appreciated it because I knew Andrew Breitbart, and it was a great souvenir. But that's all it was. It was just a keepsake because I knew who Andrew Breitbart was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ed, we have the key piece of evidence, or one of the key pieces of evidence right here. The toe tag. Go into why you never told the Los Angeles coroner's office or the LAPD about this toe tag.
Initially, I didn't feel like it was that important. I mean, at the moment, it was a souvenir. But as things progressed, and I began seeing reports, for example, from Ed Winter saying Michael had nothing to do with the autopsy. See, guys like Alex Jones and whatnot were saying, "Hey, Mike Cormier, he autopsied Breitbart, now he's dead," and on and on and on. He died the same day that Andrew Breitbart's preliminary autopsy was released. So there was all sorts of theories going around. So I just started thinking to myself as I'm watching these reports, I'm going, well, yeah, Michael did have something to do with the autopsy. He did a private one. So once that came out, I had a sense. I don't know how to explain it, except I just didn't feel like I wanted to tell anybody about it. I didn't trust him.
What, did you also fear for your life, or?
No, I didn't. My sister Gina made contact with one other individual who I don't know if I'm at liberty to mention or not. Probably I shouldn't. But he's the only person that we had told about the toe tag. And he right off the bat wanted the toe tag from us. He said we were in danger. So we thought, well, we're just going to hold on to it and not tell anybody else about it.
You can mention his name.
Okay, Dr. Jim Garrow. My sister had regular contact with Dr. Jim Garrow, probably within a year after Mike died.
And that's the same individual who made the statement about Tom Clancy and Breitbart, Michael Cormier, Michael Hastings all being connected.
Yes.
Okay, we'll leave it at that.
Okay. Yep. We didn't trust anybody after that. So.
This is the toe tag.
Yeah, that's it. That was the one.
Sharon and the FBI agent that we talked to both referred to a blue journal that is missing. Sharon, when I talked to her, basically conveyed that she went up to pick up Michael's belongings from the coroner's office.
Mm-hmm.
First, she is given a phone call to come pick them up.
Yeah.
And then she's, gets another phone call that same day to basically hold off, come pick them up later. And when she does go the next day to pick them up, Ed Winter is there. He's not holding the box. The box is on the floor, or on a table.
Yeah.
And he actually is just there, basically to talk to her a little bit. But she said the first thing that she noticed was the blue journal missing. And that's what the FBI agent told you and your sister when you first contacted him. Go into the blue journal.
Yeah, that's right. We always knew that Mike was the kind of guy that just wrote stuff down. He was a journaler. My wife was a journaler. I'm not. But we knew Mike was a journaler, but we didn't know that he had one, let's say, at the coroner's office. But when we spoke with this retired FBI agent, and he did some of his own investigations, he told us, he said, your brother Mike had a journal and it's missing. We asked him, how did he know that? And he was not at liberty to tell us. He has some connections in the LA area, and he wouldn't tell us his source. But and then we found out through you that you had talked to Sharon, and she told you the same thing. So 2 different independent people that don't know each other, have never met, that had never communicated, both say the same thing. Michael had a journal and it's missing, and we don't know where it is.
What is the big deal about this journal disappearing? Why would it disappear?
The only thing we can speculate on, and I know that it's speculation, is the fact that when Michael did the autopsy on Andrew Breitbart that day, he saw something. And I don't know what it was, but he saw something that may have not looked right, and he jotted it in his journal. And there may be, and you know what? There may be other cases that he worked on within the coroner's office. Regular cases where he just jotted little notes down. And you know what? He respected the privacy of the victims or the autopsy people, the people that were being autopsied. I believe he respected their privacy, so he didn't broadcast it, but he just made notations about it.
Yeah, plus that's his work, so he may want to take a note about a case to remember for another case coming up.
Absolutely. Exactly. So. See, he used to call me up and say, I have a theory about meth. He said, I'm beginning to connect the dots, and when I see a case come in, he said, I can actually walk up to the detective and say, hey, there's meth involved, isn't there? And the detectives would say, how do you know? So Michael was studying. He was studying the whole process of autopsies and death and causes, etc. So, yeah, the journal may have been just an innocent way for him to learn. He's documenting things that he's seeing so that he can connect the dots later on. Because he did a video. He actually did a video where he talks about methamphetamines being a real doorway for some problems in people's lives. So, yeah.
Next, Ed and I talked about toxicologist Dan Anderson and Detective Castro. We examined why Michael Cormier's stomach contents were destroyed, since they contained the key piece of evidence in regards to the arsenic.
Ed, go into detail what made you call the hospital the night that your brother was there to suggest that it was poison, possibly in his system.
My wife called me at 4:45, told me Mike's in the hospital, that I better come home. I got home and spoke with one of my sisters, I believe it was Marianne, and Marianne told me that Mike's in the hospital. He's not doing well. So I called the hospital and spoke with, initially I believe it was a Dr. Lindsay, and then a nurse Veronica in the ER, not the ER, the ICU. She was telling me that Michael's blood pressure continues to drop, and I simply said, have you checked for poison? Her response was, do you believe he's in a relationship that's that toxic? And I said, yeah. There had been some issues. Him and his wife had been having some problems. And so I'm not proud to say, but it was an innocent response. I suspected that his wife did.
And that's basically spouse is always the first suspect in a either homicide or a case like this where they don't know what is wrong. She would, she initially did become suspect. So that wasn't anything outside of, the box, really. It was just, intuition.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
Ed, how surprised were you when you found out your brother's stomach contents were not tested and had actually been destroyed? I mean, we know from the cases we've looked into, the poison cases, specifically, they keep the stomach contents to test for the timeline and test for, what type of poison was found. But common sense tells you that stomach contents, poison, we don't have a timeline, we don't know who did it, get it tested. Go into what Ortiz and Rangan told you about the stomach contents not being able to be tested.
When I spoke with Dr. Ortiz initially, and I believe it was in April of 2013, so we're almost a year after Mike's death. And as we were talking, I actually had the autopsy report in front of me. And I had circled some questions, and there was one question there where Dr. Rangan's the one that does the summary. He takes all the information from all the different doctors that are participating in the autopsy, and then he makes a recommendation or makes a final summary.
Yeah.
In that particular report, Dr. Rangan is asking, he says, he was requesting that a speciation test be done in the arsenic to find out whether it was a trivalent and pentavalent qualities, et cetera, et cetera. Bottom line, Rangan was saying, I wanted to know the origin of this arsenic. There's certain testing that can be done on stomach contents and only stomach contents because of the way the properties of arsenic and what happens when it gets in the blood. So Dr. Rangan is wanting to speciate this arsenic in the belly to find out the origin of the arsenic. And when I asked Dr. Ortiz on the phone, I said, Dr. Ortiz, why wasn't this arsenic tested? His response to me, I quote, "Lab inefficiency, Mr. Cormier, lab inefficiency." That's what he said. I was stunned. This is the LA County Coroner's Office. This is the most powerful coroner's office in the world.
One of their own.
They can take a thread off of your shirt and tell you what sheep it came from. Are you kidding me? But lab inefficiency was the answer to that I got. And so I asked him, I said, well, who told Dr. Rangan that it couldn't be tested? He said, the same one that told me, Mr. Cormier. Dr. Dan Anderson told us that this test could not be done. We were numb. I got off the phone and I looked at my wife. I said, they've destroyed the stomach contents. After they found out it couldn't be tested, and we found the lab. And I know I'm rambling a little bit, but so your initial question, we were numb, and then we were angry that they couldn't do the stomach contents on Michael. We were beside ourselves.
What about Dan Anderson emailing you and basically saying that his stomach was pumped at the hospital?
Oh, yeah. That was another runaround that we got from these guys. Yeah. So Dan Anderson, and by the way, Dan Anderson gets all these tests on his desk. His name is on several pages of the autopsy report. But initially, he says something about, if I recall correctly, your brother spent several days in the hospital, he's saying. And so therefore, the testing in the stomach would not be so relevant, as they may have already pumped his stomach. Double question marks at the end of his thing, He was trying to sell us a package of goods, okay? That's the bottom line. Dan Anderson knew full well that the stomach contents had not been pumped, and he knew full well all the details of the case because his name is on the very page of the toxicology report.
Yeah,
okay.
Correct.
So that's the outrage here, is that you think that an email to a bunch of hicks back east, you know what I'm saying? We got nobody to prove otherwise. They're giving us all this stuff, and we have no one out there to prove whether he's telling the truth or not. So, yeah. Stomach contents were destroyed per retention policy, is what he said. But initially, he tried to sell us that there was no stomach contents. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your brother's stomach was pumped.
And did you take that answer and be satisfied with it when it got brought up again?
Exactly.
Dan Anderson stated that your brother's stomach contents were destroyed per retention policy, which usually is 365 days on closed cases, and it really depends on the litigation at hand with some cases on, if they need that or not. But stomach contents, number one, being a key factor, and They didn't even hold it 365 days, did they?
They did not. They did not. When we finally pushed them and pushed them and pushed them, Dan Anderson sent me an email and actually the specific date, March 25th. Yeah, March 25th, 2013. It was discarded on March 25th, 2013. Michael died on April 20th, 2012. So less than a year, and they destroyed the stomach contents. Yeah.
In the emails with Castro, it seems like he switched attitudes on Michael like midway through the investigation.
Yeah. Like I said, even on the phone with Detective Castro initially, he was all fired up. I mean, I'll fly this stuff back to Quantico myself because we're going to get it tested.
And
right?
Something that was pointed out, Quantico itself, meaning that they had a lab that they could have sent it to.
Exactly.
And Dan Anderson can't find a lab when you contacted him about getting stomach contents, blood, everything sent off.
Right.
Could find a lab to Ortiz and Rangan.
Right.
When you found a private lab, that's when all this happened. So basically, it's just a big stall. It's
Yeah, when I spoke with Dan Anderson on the phone, he told me, I tried to find a lab. Are you kidding me? You're kidding.
It took me 2 minutes on Google, typing it in, and then just scrolling down to find a lab that is private. It takes 2 minutes.
Dan Anderson said he could not find a lab. He could not find one. So some of the emails with Detective Castro after we did find the lab, and when we called the lab up in Washington State, and I talked with a guy named Ben up there, and I told him that the stomach contents had been destroyed, his first response was, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that." I said, Ben, what about, we've got the blood still, we've got some other stuff still. He said, yeah, he said, they can send it up. But he said, I really can't guarantee anything. He said, we really needed the stomach contents to really break this down to find the origin. So they saved the blood, they saved these other items, but they don't save the gun. They don't save the smoking gun. But anyway, I every time I get into that, I lose it. So we send the blood up. They send up what they have to this lab, and now we're waiting for the results. And so April, May, June, July, August. The lab in Washington State finally got the stuff in July and did it in July. We finally got the results back from LA in September. But initially, Castro is kind of just giving us information. Any word from Dan yet, Detective? No, I haven't heard anything yet. I'll keep you posted. That sort of just back and forth stuff. So then I finally asked Detective Castro, I said, look, are you uncomfortable with getting information from the LA County Coroner's Office? I mean, because if you are, I'm not. I mean, I have no problem talking to Dan Anderson and writing these guys. So his response back was, and I just would like to quote to you this one-line email that I got from Detective Castro that day. This was on September 8th, 2014. Hi, Ed. No, I am not uncomfortable, but I'm not going to play middleman between you and the coroner's office. Are you kidding me? Middleman?
Yeah, that's his job.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Any concerns you may have with them, please address it with them. That was the email I got when I asked.
And you tried to address it.
And I tried to. We were just wanting information. And you know what? I'm not getting down on the lab in Washington State. They have their protocol. LA County sent them the samples. LA County gets the results. I contacted the lab. They said, we can't give you the results. You'll have to get it through LA County Coroner's Office. So I continued to try. And that was the response that I got. My understanding was that LA County Coroner and LAPD work together on cases. Wasn't that your understanding?
Yeah, that's pretty much how they solve cases.
They work together.
Yeah.
Evidence is shared because they want to get to the bottom of this because this is one of their own, especially one of their own. They want to get to the bottom of this. It's bizarre. It's bizarre.
It is.
ago, after your email about the test with Dan, which Dan communicated with you, after your email about the test which Dan communicated with you, I thought that you, being lead detective on the case, would want us to communicate with you. It's strange to me that you see yourself as a middleman in all this, detective. I thought that perhaps you may have a little bit more detail yourself, but not obviously. You're satisfied with the low-level information that Dan provided you with. I guess you assumed we would be too. Oh, and that's when I asked him, do you have any concerns with the LA County Coroner's Office? They destroyed the most key piece of evidence that we had in this case, and you're not fazed a bit. Why save the blood and yet throw out the stomach contents? You know what I'm saying? Why would you save the blood when you don't really need it anymore? You already know through the blood that it is arsenic. But you throw out the one thing that could have told you where it came from. Any concerns I have? Wow. You guys really don't work together, do you? I'll talk to Den myself, no problem. Thanks for getting back right away with me. Anyway, to answer your questions, no, I don't have any concerns with the LA County Coroner's Office. I mean, he became our enemy. He became our rival, you know, in the end here. They destroyed the stomach contents per their policy. They have the right to do so. Really? They have the right to do so. Would I have preferred they keep it? Sure. But I don't necessarily need it in the future. I receive information that this could have been a homicide. Oh, I don't necessarily need it in the future. If I receive, he didn't put if there, but I don't necessarily need it if in the future I receive information about this could have been a homicide. So he's saying if he received information, so here's the information I'm hoping we can receive, that Michael got the last dose while he was in the hospital. That makes it a homicide, wouldn't you say? We've filed murder cases here without ever finding the victim's body. I've treated this case as a homicide from the get-go, even though there's a lot more evidence to suggest suicide, which is bull. Detective Castro became Scientist Castro. Scientist Castro now. What evidence does he have that it was a suicide? The one little note that never mentions anything about death at all, a little lover's quarrel between husband and wife, that's his proof. And a couple of little references that Mike wrote many, many years ago. Yeah, that's crazy, man. Crazy. He became our rival, not our what would you call it, advocate between us and the coroner's office. He became our rival. You know what? I think he's afraid of the coroner's office, to be honest with you. I think the guy's afraid, and you know what? Based upon what the retired FBI guy said, the most powerful organization, the most powerful part of the crime department in the state is the coroner's office. They're more powerful than LAPD. They're more powerful than LAPD. So I think Castro's afraid of him. You know, he hasn't got the balls to stand up to the coroner's office. No,
that's good.
Well, he hasn't got the balls to stand up to him. And he actually kind of said about how nervous he was one day when he had to sit there with Lakshmanan and Ortiz and some of these other guys. He told my sister how nervous he was sitting in their presence, you know. And he made some sort of a remark to Gina, which I don't recall, and it wouldn't be fair to me to try to.
I mean, it makes sense because, I mean, he's basically working for them. You would think with them, but it's for them.
For them, not with them. It has to be. They destroyed the stomach contents per their policy. They have the right to do so. And I'm not playing middleman. Why? I'm not playing middleman because I actually am on their side and I'm working with them. I'm not gonna. This communication was our last communication that I had with Steve Castro. I think we may have had one more phone call together. I'm not positive. I know for a couple of years after, Gina would call him every year on New Year's, and I emailed him a couple of times on New Year's Day just to say, well, another year is here. What do you got? But we've had no communication with him. It's been several years now, until yesterday.
Yeah.
And we're still waiting a call back from his desk. We did find where he is, and
Got it. Okay. So our homicide unit is no longer at the divisional level. They've moved to an office outside of the division. Let me get you that number, all right? I'm going to put you on hold 1 second.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
I got the number for you, Ed.
Thank you very much. 818
374
374
9550.
9550. I appreciate it very much, Detective. Thank you.
All right, good luck.
All right, man. Thanks.
On September 15th, 2017, I received a text message at 12:58 a.m. It stated, quote, "We know you've been researching things that are better left alone. We've traced your online activity in places you don't think we can see. Walk away." I didn't really take this into account, really. I thought my number was compromised. Possibly somebody got it off the internet and they were playing some type of game with me. This was at the height of my investigation, so like I said, I really did not take it into account. The next day, while checking the mail, I encountered a bloody hunting knife. At first, I thought to myself, what the hell is a bloody hunting knife doing in the mailbox? I did not directly connect it to the text message the night before. I simply thought maybe that it was somewhere on the property and maybe somebody stuck it in the mailbox thinking that it belonged to me, etc. There had been several workers, utility workers, so maybe I thought it belonged to one of them. Like I said, it was dropped in the yard. But then after analyzing the whole situation, the blood on the knife, and just really thinking about everything, I called the police, filed a report about the knife, and it kind of went quiet. I did not receive any more text messages, nor did I ever receive anything else in the mailbox, but I can tell you from my point of view that I have received suspicious messages, emails, and comments on articles. Anything from death threats to people thinking that there's some type of connection that isn't being followed through with. And I guess I'm trying to bring light to the perils of investigating cold cases, and especially when you bring any type of exposure to the case through the internet, you run into situations like this.